At 11, my parents blamed me for my sister's arrest, called me a bad influence, and sent me away without a phone. I kept going and studied. Years later, they begged me to defend him in court, not knowing I was the lawyer they tried to erase. The air in my office that Wednesday afternoon, the precise middle of last month, felt thick, almost suffocating. It was heavy with unspoken accusations, with the ghosts of a past I thought I'd buried, and with a desperate, clinging hope from the figures now standing awkwardly before me. My assistant, bless her diligent heart, had just shown them in, and their faces were a canvas of shock, then dawning horror, as their eyes, wide and disbelieving, finally recognized me, sitting there behind my desk, my mother's mouth opened and closed several times, a silent fish out of water, struggling for air, struggling for words. My father's complexion, already mottled with age, went from pale to a deep, angry flush, and in that frozen moment, as they stood transfixed, I felt a strange, almost unsettling sense of triumph, an unexpected, potent cocktail of vindication, and something else, something I'm still trying to name. You see, for months now, this story has been a lead weight in my chest. A secret, a hard-won victory, a wound that, even after all these years, just wouldn't completely close. But I need to tell you what happened, because what went down last month, believe it or not, it didn't just prove that karma exists, it proved that sometimes the universe has a truly twisted sense of humor. What happened over 20 years ago shredded my childhood into tiny, irreparable pieces. But what happened last month? It stitched those pieces back together in a way I never saw coming. Let's rewind a bit to a time before power suits and corner offices, before framed diplomas and the cold, hard gleam of justice. Let's talk about a little girl, an 11-year-old version of me, who watched her older sister, Vanessa, climb down a trellis from her bedroom window. It was a Friday evening, that crisp autumn air carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the faint, unsettling hum of a distant party. Vanessa was 15 then, already a creature of the night, drawn to the shadows and the rough crowd from her high school, kids who knew all the wrong shortcuts, all the forbidden whispers. They smoked behind the gym. They talked about things that made my stomach churn when I overheard them. And that night, they were headed to a warehouse party across town. I stood there, a small, quiet sentinel by my window, debating. Do I tell? Do I betray her? Something felt wrong. The way she'd been all week, jumpy, secretive, her eyes darting like a trapped bird, it screamed trouble. But telling on Vanessa, that would just make me the family traitor. Again. So I kept silent, crawled into bed, and tried to sleep. The kind of sleep that's punctuated by the dread of what might be coming. Around midnight, the whole neighborhood exploded into light and sound. Police sirens, red and blue strobing through my curtains, painting my room in frantic, desperate hues. Shouting, car doors slamming, and then my mother's voice, a raw, ragged sound, screaming Vanessa's name. I raced downstairs, my bare feet slapping cold wood, to find my parents in the driveway talking to officers. And there she was, Vanessa, mascara streaking down her face, slumped in the back of a police car. The party had been raided. Alcohol, illegal substances, stolen property. Vanessa wasn't directly involved in the theft, let's be clear about that, but she was present. She was drinking, and at 15, that was enough. She was arrested along with several others. My parents had to drive to the station at 2 a.m. to retrieve her. The ride home? Silent. Utterly, terrifyingly silent. Save for my mother's choked sobs, Vanessa stared out the window, a blank, defiant wall. My father's knuckles were white, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing holding him together. I sat in the back seat, a bewildered child, wondering how our family, our seemingly perfect family, had spiraled to this point, and this right here is where we touch on something profoundly human, yet deeply destructive, the psychology of scapegoating and parental favoritism. Instead of confronting Vanessa's behavior, which would mean facing uncomfortable truths about their golden child, my parents needed someone else to blame. They needed an external enemy, a convenient narrative to protect their own idealized image of their family, and that, dear viewer, became me. The very next morning, my mother cornered me in the kitchen. I was pouring cereal, just trying to escape into the mundane. She asked if I knew about the party. Truthfully, I admitted watching Vanessa sneak out, but I added, I didn't say anything because I was scared of getting her into trouble. My mother's expression hardened instantly, like stone. She called my father into the room. Together, they sat me down at that kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten countless family dinners, and delivered my sentence. You are a bad influence on Vanessa, my mother stated, her voice icy. My father chimed in, your jealousy and resentment have pushed her toward rebellion. They claimed that if I had been a better sister, more supportive, more loving, Vanessa wouldn't have felt the need to seek validation from dangerous friends. My silence, they said, proved I wanted her to fail. I tried to defend myself, to explain the years of blatant favoritism, the constant comparisons, the unfair blame. My father cut me off dismissively, saying I was making excuses, refusing to take responsibility. And Vanessa, she stood in the doorway watching the entire conversation. Her eyes were empty, devoid of emotion, devoid of any attempt to defend me. She just watched as my world was systematically dismantled. Within a week, they had arranged my banishment. I was to live with Uncle Terence and Aunt Lucinda in another state, 3 hours away. They had no children, ran a small farm, and were, by all accounts, decent people. My parents framed it as a fresh start for me, away from negative influences, but everyone knew the truth. They were removing me from their lives to protect Vanessa's image. The morning I left, my mother packed my belongings into 2 suitcases. Not 3, 2. She confiscated my cell phone. You don't need distractions where you're going. My father barely looked at me as he loaded my bags into Uncle Terence's truck. Vanessa offered a hug, a whisper of an apology that felt hollow, meaningless, like the rustle of dead leaves. Uncle Terence and Aunt Lucinda, bless their cotton, picking hearts, were kind. They worked hard, expected hard work in return, and gave me a small room and clear expectations. It was like stepping into a different universe. No favoritism, no drama, just honest work, hot meals, and the quiet rhythm of the farm. School became my refuge. Without a phone, without social media, without any of the distractions of a normal childhood, I poured every ounce of energy into my studies. My grades, which had always been good, soared to exceptional. Teachers noticed. They recommended advanced classes. By high school, I was taking college-level courses, and then the terrifying prospect of debate club, public speaking. Me, the quiet one who preferred books to people, it terrified me, absolutely petrified me, but something deeper, a quiet rage, a burning sense of injustice, pushed me forward. I learned to channel that anger, that hurt, into persuasive arguments. My parents called Uncle Terence occasionally, but never asked to speak with me directly. Holiday cards arrived, generic, with a $20 bill tucked inside. No visits, no real interest. Vanessa would text, sometimes, brief messages like, how are you? But they felt obligatory, a mere formality. Years passed. I graduated high school as valedictorian, earning a full scholarship to a prestigious university. Uncle Terence and Aunt Lucinda were there, beaming, their pride a warm, tangible thing. My parents sent a card. Vanessa didn't acknowledge it at all. Transitioning to college felt like shedding an old skin. Nobody knew my story. Nobody knew the family that had rejected me. I could reinvent myself. I could become whoever I wanted to be. For the first time, I wasn't the unwanted sister, the scapegoat daughter. I was just me. I majored in political science, with law school always buzzing in the back of my mind. The subject fascinated me. How systems of power worked, how law shaped society, how justice could be wielded as both a weapon and a shield. Professors encouraged my passion, and then, during my sophomore year, almost by accident, I joined the mock trial team, a flyer tacked onto a bulletin board. Tryouts for courtroom advocacy. The idea was terrifying, but that deeper push, maybe it was the anger of never having someone defend me. Maybe it was the desire to become that person. I showed up and I delivered an opening statement that surprised even myself. The team captain, a senior named Marcus Sullivan, pulled me aside. He said I had raw talent, but needed refinement, passionate but unstructured, sincere, but too emotional. He offered to mentor me, and Marcus became the older brother I never had. He taught me how to control my voice, to use silence for emphasis, to read a judge's subtle cues. We spent countless hours in empty classrooms, running through scenarios, perfecting arguments. My skills sharpened dramatically. Our team went from regional tournaments to nationals, and during my junior year at the National Mock Trial Championship in Dallas, we faced the defending champions. I delivered the closing argument. And when they announced our victory, Marcus lifted me off the ground in celebration. That night, at the celebratory dinner, he made a toast. He said, I had the brightest future of anyone he'd ever coached. He predicted I'd be a formidable attorney, feared by prosecutors, trusted by clients. His words meant more than any praise I'd ever received from my own parents. Wait, let that sink in. The validation from a mentor, a colleague, meant more than any fleeting acknowledgement from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Between competitions, I interned at law firms. First, a small family law practice, where I saw the human side of legal work. Clients weren't just cases, they were people in crisis. Then a larger corporate firm, intellectually challenging, less emotionally raw. Senior partners noticed my attention to detail, but it was my internship at the county public defender's office the summer before senior year that changed everything. The clients, mostly poor, often minorities, facing charges from petty theft to serious felonies. Many had been failed by every system meant to help them: schools, social services, family. Sitting in those interview rooms, hearing their stories, I saw reflections of my own experience. People blamed for circumstances beyond their control. Individuals labeled as problems, not victims of larger systemic failures. The sheer injustice of it ignited something fierce inside me. My supervisor, Carolyn Jang, a veteran public defender, saw that fire. She started bringing me to court, letting me sit second chair, teaching me the practical skills law professors never covered: how to talk to hostile witnesses, how to spot inconsistencies in police reports, how to humanize clients that prosecutors wanted to demonize. One case, a 17-year-old kid named Marcus Johnson, charged with armed robbery, stayed with me. The evidence seemed damning: eyewitness ID, proximity to the crime, stolen items, but something felt wrong. Carolyn let me dig. Weeks of investigation, interviews, security footage. Turns out the eyewitness had initially identified someone else. The stolen items were planted by a cousin trying to avoid arrest. The real perpetrator confessed 3 weeks before trial. Watching the judge dismiss all charges, seeing Marcus's mother collapse in grateful tears, feeling the weight of injustice lift from an innocent kid's shoulders, that showed me exactly what kind of lawyer I wanted to become. Every achievement felt like building a fortress around myself, brick by brick, ensuring nobody could ever hurt me the way my family had. But more than that, it meant building a fortress that could shelter others from similar cruelty. Senior year blurred into LSAT prep applications and interviews. I scored in the 98th percentile. Acceptance letters piled up from top law schools, scholarships, opportunities. Uncle Terence and Aunt Lucinda, my true anchors, helped me weigh the options. I chose a school known for producing exceptional trial lawyers. It was rigorous, competitive, but I was ready. Moving across the country was terrifying and exhilarating. Law school was brutal, the Socratic method. Professors relentless, cold, calling students, dissecting cases, making examples out of any faltering. The pressure was immense. But I'd survived worse. Being sent away at 11, rebuilding my life from nothing, proving my worth without family support, that prepared me for this grind. I studied contracts, courts, criminal law, civil procedure with obsessive focus. While classmates partied, I was in the library until closing. Legal writing was particularly challenging. No flowery prose, no emotional appeals, clear, concise arguments, persuasive power stripped of all unnecessary language. My torts professor, Harrison Whitfield, a former appellate judge, took an interest. He used my case briefs as examples. We discussed landmark decisions. He pushed me to think bigger. Second-year clinical programs, actual clients. Under supervision, I joined the criminal defense clinic, handling misdemeanor cases for indigent defendants. These weren't mock trials anymore. Real people's futures hung in the balance. The first time I stood before a judge, representing an actual client, my hands shook so badly I could barely hold my notes. But once I started speaking, muscle memory from years of mock trial took over. I argued a motion to suppress evidence, Fourth Amendment violations, relevant case law, The judge granted the motion, charges dismissed. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt invincible. This was my calling, my purpose. Every case, an opportunity to stand between vulnerable people and a system that often crushed them. Every victory, proof that I could protect others in ways no one had protected me. Third year, I won the national trial competition. My coach called my closing argument the finest she'd witnessed in 20 years. Job offers poured in. Big corporate firms, six-figure salaries, corner offices, partnership tracks, but they felt hollow. I wanted to practice law that mattered, represent people, not profits. Aside from specializing in criminal defense caught my eye, federal charges, white-collar crime, homicide defense, challenging work, a culture that emphasized justice. I accepted their offer. Graduating in the top 5% of my class, I passed the bar exam on my first attempt. 3 weeks later, I started. The transition from student to practicing attorney was jarring. Suddenly, my decisions had real consequences. Mistakes could mean clients going to prison, families destroyed, lives ruined. My first major case, defending a man accused of securities fraud, mountains of evidence, emails, financial records, witnesses. Most at the firm thought it unwinnable. My client insisted he was innocent, framed by a business partner. I spent 3 months preparing, 18-hour days, dissecting every document. Inconsistencies emerged, timestamps, forged email headers, contradictory witness testimony. I built the defense, proved he'd been set up. The trial lasted 4 weeks. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Not guilty. My client wept openly. Senior partners looked at me differently. I wasn't just promising. I delivered results. Working as an attorney was everything I hoped it would be. Courtrooms, arguing cases, protecting rights. It gave me purpose. I was good at it. Winning cases more experienced lawyers thought unwinnable. Partners noticed. I was promoted faster than typical. By 28, I had my own office, a growing reputation. My caseload exploded. Corporate executives, medical professionals, small business owners, each case a unique challenge, aggressive tactics, quiet negotiation. One particularly difficult case involved a college professor accused of assaulting a student, circumstantial evidence, mostly. He said, she said. Public opinion had already convicted him. News stations camped outside, reporters shouting questions. The pressure was immense. His career was destroyed regardless of the verdict. His family received death threats. Even colleagues abandoned him. Everyone assumed guilt. I spent weeks interviewing witnesses, phone records, reconstructing timelines. Gradually, holes appeared in the prosecution's narrative. Text messages showed the accuser had threatened to ruin his career after a failing grade. Security footage placed him elsewhere. Medical evidence contradicted injury claims. Presenting this in court required delicate handling. I had to challenge credibility without appearing to attack a potential victim. A precarious balance. One wrong word and the jury could turn. I cross-examined carefully, letting contradictions speak for themselves. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Acquittal. He collapsed in his chair, overcome. He later told me I had given him back his life. The local newspaper, which had vilified him, barely mentioned the acquittal. Such is the nature of public opinion. Not all cases ended in victory. A young man, vehicular manslaughter, drunk driving, 2 lives lost, overwhelming evidence, blood alcohol, speeding, surveillance. His family begged me to get him off completely, insisted he was a good kid who made one mistake. But the facts were undeniable. The victims' families deserved justice. I negotiated a plea agreement, guilt acknowledged. Reduced sentencing based on age and lack of prior record, 8 years instead of 15. His mother screamed at me in the courthouse hallway, said I failed her son. The victim's family said it was too lenient. Nobody was satisfied, which probably meant the outcome was fair. These moral complexities weighed on me constantly. Defense attorneys often get criticized for defending guilty people, as if everyone doesn't deserve legal representation. The justice system only works when both sides have skilled advocates. My job wasn't to determine guilt or innocence. That was the jury's role. My job was to ensure the prosecution proved their case beyond a reasonable doubt. This is a critical point in understanding our legal system, an educational anchor about the nuances of criminal defense. It's not about condoning crimes, it's about upholding constitutional rights and ensuring due process which is the bedrock of a fair society, between major trials, dozens of smaller cases, drug possession, theft, assault. Many clients were poor, caught in cycles of poverty and crime. Defending them meant fighting not just the charges, but the underlying inequalities that created the circumstances leading to arrest. I volunteered at legal aid clinics, free consultations, single mothers facing eviction, immigrants, elderly folks scammed by predatory lenders. These cases paid nothing, but they mattered deeply. One Saturday afternoon, a woman named Patricia brought her teenage son. Spray painting graffiti on a bridge, minor charges, but he had a juvenile record for shoplifting. Prosecutor wanted to try him as an adult. Serious jail time, permanent criminal record. I took the case pro bono, met with the district attorney. The kid was talented. His graffiti was artistic, not destructive tagging. I arranged for him to complete a mural program at a community center as alternative sentencing. Charges reduced to a misdemeanor. Probation contingent on completion. 6 months later, Patricia sent a photo, her son's completed mural, a vibrant depiction of neighborhood history spanning an entire wall. He discovered a legitimate outlet. Applying to art schools, one intervention, his trajectory changed completely. These moments reminded me why I became a lawyer, not for the high-profile victories or the substantial paychecks, though those were nice. I practiced law to give people what I never had, someone willing to fight for them when the system seemed stacked against them. My reputation continued to grow. Other attorneys referred their most challenging cases. Legal publications profiled my successes. Bar associations invited me to speak. At one conference in Chicago, I delivered a keynote address about defending unpopular clients. The room was packed. I spoke about moral courage, professional ethics, the importance of vigorous defense regardless of public opinion. The standing ovation afterward felt surreal. A veteran attorney practicing 40 years approached me. He said my presentation reminded him why he chose this profession. We talked for hours. Cases, philosophy, the evolving nature of justice. He said true success meant maintaining integrity while achieving results, something many sacrificed. His words resonated. I had built my career on principles forged from childhood pain: never abandon someone in need, always fight injustice, stand up for those who cannot stand for themselves. These weren't just professional values, they were survival mechanisms that had transformed into a moral code. The firm made me partner during my 7th year, the youngest person to achieve that status in the firm's history. My office expanded. A small conference table, bookshelves lined with legal texts, a secretary for my schedule. The prestige was flattering but also strange. Sometimes, late at night, working alone in that office, I would think about that 11-year-old girl packing 2 suitcases while her family watched silently. If she could see me now, sitting in this leather chair, surrounded by symbols of professional achievement, would she believe it? Would she understand that survival was possible? That thriving was achievable? Partnership brought increased responsibilities, mentoring junior associates, firm management. I trained younger lawyers the way Marcus Sullivan and Carolyn Jang had trained me, emphasizing skills and ethics over shortcuts. One associate, Jennifer Martinez, reminded me of myself, hardworking, prepared, but with a visible pain in her eyes, a haunting quality that hinted at a difficult history. I took her under my wing. Her first major trial was a disaster. She overprepared to the point of paralysis. Stumbled, missed objections, failed to connect with the jury. The client was convicted. Jennifer blamed herself. She came to my office afterward, crying, saying she wasn't cut out for this. I told her about my own first real trial, the shaking hands, the mispronounced terms, the feeling of being a complete fraud. Failure wasn't the end, I explained. It was part of the process. Every attorney loses cases. The question is whether you learn from mistakes or let them destroy your confidence. Jennifer listened, wiped her eyes, and asked how I overcame the fear. I told her fear never truly disappears. You just learn to channel it into preparation, into performance. Nervousness before trial means you care. Apathy is the real enemy. She went on to become an excellent trial attorney. Watching her grow reminded me that legacy mattered. The impact we have on others, the knowledge we share, the support we provide. These things outlast individual victories. During all these years, contact with my parents remained minimal. They knew I'd graduated college and law school because Uncle Terence, in his infrequent phone calls, would mention it. But they never reached out to congratulate me, never asked about my career. Vanessa had married, 2 kids, worked part-time at a boutique. Her life seemed stable, unremarkable. Based on the sparse information Uncle Terence gathered, Uncle Terence, ever the optimist, tried encouraging reconciliation. On holidays, he'd update me. Vanessa's wedding, her children's births, my parents' retirement, each update felt like hearing about strangers, not blood relatives. Once, about 5 years into my law career, Uncle Terence mentioned my mother had asked about me during Thanksgiving dinner. Was I happy? Had I found someone? Did I ever think about visiting? The questions came too late, filtered through a third party, not asked directly. I told Uncle Terence to tell her I was fine, and left it at that. Aunt Lucinda, on the other hand, never pushed. She just made sure I knew their door was always open. During difficult trials, she'd send care packages, homemade cookies, encouraging notes. Her support came without conditions, without expectations, the kind of unconditional love my parents never offered. The irony wasn't lost on me. The relatives who took me in out of obligation had become more family than the people who raised me for 11 years. Uncle Terence and Aunt Lucinda attended my law school graduation, my partnership celebration. Every milestone, my parents sent cards, generic, occasional checks I never cashed. I wondered sometimes if they felt guilt or regret. Did my mother lie awake thinking about the daughter she sent away? Did my father question their choice, or had they, through the insidious power of cognitive dissonance, convinced themselves that abandoning me was justified? Necessary, the only reasonable response to Vanessa's problems. You see, cognitive dissonance is a psychological phenomenon where people hold conflicting beliefs or values, and to reduce the discomfort, they rationalize their actions, often by distorting reality. They likely convinced themselves they were doing the right thing, not just for Vanessa, but for me, to escape the inconvenient truth of their own unfairness. The answers didn't really matter. Their feelings, whatever they were, didn't change the past, didn't heal the damage. I had built a life without them, carved out success from nothing, become someone powerful and respected. Their absence had shaped me profoundly, but it no longer defined me. Then, last month, everything changed. My assistant buzzed my intercom, potential client. Theodore, the last name sounded familiar, but I didn't make the connection until she mentioned he was calling from my hometown. My stomach dropped. Theodore, my father's name. Part of me wanted to refuse the meeting immediately, but the lawyer part of me, the professional, knew I needed to hear him out. Professional curiosity, I told myself. It won. I scheduled the consultation for the following Wednesday at 2 in the afternoon. When Wednesday arrived, I prepared myself emotionally. My office felt like armor. Law books, framed diplomas, certificates of achievement. I wore my sharpest suit, practiced keeping my expression neutral. Whatever happened, I would remain professional. My assistant showed them in at exactly 2. My father entered first. He looked older than I remembered, grayer. Deeper wrinkles. Shoulders slightly stooped. My mother followed, clutching her purse with both hands, her eyes wide, searching. And that moment I described at the beginning, that moment of recognition, that's when it hit. Both of them, they froze. My mother's mouth opened and closed. My father's face flushed. I gestured the chairs across from my desk. Please, have a seat. My voice, calm, controlled. My mother finally found hers, stammering my name like a question. I confirmed my identity. And what legal matter brings you to my office today? The professional distance in my tone clearly unsettled them. My father cleared his throat multiple times. Then he began. Vanessa's husband. Arrested for embezzlement. He was an accountant for a construction company, skimming funds for over 2 years. The evidence was substantial. Digital records, witness testimony, paper trails. The family was desperate. They needed a skilled criminal defense attorney. Someone had recommended my firm without mentioning my name specifically, and my father had called, requesting the best lawyer available. Sitting there, listening to them plead for help, for the protection of Vanessa's family, was surreal. My mother cried, dabbing her eyes with tissues. My father's voice cracked as he described Vanessa's struggles, how the grandchildren were confused and scared. They needed someone who could minimize the damage, negotiate a plea deal, get the charges reduced. I let them finish every word without interrupting. When silence fell, I started asking questions, specifics, exact charges, prosecution evidence, any statements to police. My father answered everything, clearly surprised by my thoroughness, my professionalism. After gathering all the relevant information, I leaned back in my chair and delivered my assessment. The case is difficult, I stated, my voice even, but not impossible. With the right strategy, we could potentially negotiate a reduced sentence. Then, the pause, the micro hook, however, I continued, taking this case would require full transparency and absolute trust between attorney and clients. I need to know if you can handle that level of honesty. My mother nodded eagerly. They would do anything to help Vanessa's family. My father agreed. They trusted my expertise completely. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I stood up, walked to the window, looked out over the city skyline, and I told them a story. I described an 11-year-old girl blamed for her sister's mistakes, sent away by parents too cowardly to address their golden child's problems. I explained how that girl survived through sheer determination, hard work, building a career from nothing while her family largely forgot she existed. I detailed the years of silence, the absence of support, the complete, utter abandonment. My mother started sobbing halfway through. My father stared at his hands. When I finished, I turned to face them and asked the simple question, "Do you remember that girl?" My father whispered, "Yes." My mother couldn't speak through her tears. I walked back to my desk, sat down, and explained, "I am that girl. The attorney you desperately needed is the daughter you threw away 15 years ago. The professional you sought to save your perfect daughter's family is the child you blamed for everything." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother tried apologizing, words tumbling out in an incoherent stream. My father attempted to explain their reasoning back then, how stressed they were. The stakes. I held up my hand, stopping both of them. "I will take the case," I said, my voice firm, but on my terms. First, my fee would be the standard rate, no family discount. Second, all communication would go through official channels at the firm. Third, they would never, ever contact me personally about family matters. This, I stated, locking eyes with my father, is a business arrangement, nothing more. If they agreed to these conditions, I would provide the best possible defense for Vanessa's husband. They agreed immediately, too desperate to negotiate. I drafted a standard retainer agreement, explained the fee structure, scheduled a meeting with Vanessa and her husband for later that week. My assistant escorted them out while I sat at my desk, my hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline of it all. The meeting with Vanessa was equally awkward. She walked into my office with her husband, stopped dead when she saw me, and burst into tears. Her husband, to his credit, looked utterly confused until she explained our relationship. He seemed genuinely remorseful, not just about his crimes, but about how my family had treated me for 2 decades. I worked the case for 6 weeks. Built the strongest defense possible, despite my personal feelings. Professional ethics demanded my best effort, regardless of family history. I negotiated with prosecutors, challenged evidence, ultimately secured a plea agreement that reduced the sentence significantly. Vanessa's husband would serve 18 months instead of the 5 years originally threatened. With probation following release, my parents attended every court appearance, watching me work with expressions mixing pride and regret. Vanessa sent thank you cards to my office, each one apologizing for the past. I acknowledged them professionally, maintained emotional distance. After the sentencing hearing concluded, my parents approached me in the courthouse hallway. My mother asked if we could talk. Really talk about everything. My father said they wanted to make amends, to rebuild our relationship if possible. I looked at both of them for a long moment. Then I responded, "Forgiveness," I explained, "wasn't something you can request like a legal service. What you did caused damage that can't be fixed with apologies or explanations. Maybe someday I'll be ready to discuss our relationship. But that day, I finished Who's in Today. For now, the case is closed, both legally and personally. My mother started crying again. My father nodded slowly, accepting my decision. I walked away from them, out of the courthouse, into the bright afternoon sunshine. My phone buzzed. A text from Uncle Terence? How'd the case go? I smiled. Typed back, justice has been served. The firm partners praised my work, noting my professionalism under difficult circumstances. Word spread about the family connection, but my reputation remained intact. If anything, colleagues respected how I handled the situation with grace and competence. Last week, a package arrived at my office. Inside was a photo album. My mother had apparently kept it over the years. Pictures of me at various ages, school photos, newspaper clippings about my achievements that Uncle Terence must have sent them. A note explained she had followed my career from a distance, too ashamed to reach out, but proud nonetheless. I flipped through the album once, then stored it in my desk drawer. Perhaps someday I'll appreciate the gesture, but right now, it felt like too little, too late. My life had been built without their support, shaped by their absence. My success was mine alone, earned through years of hard work and determination they never witnessed. Some people ask if I regret taking the case, and honestly, the answer is complicated. Professionally, it was the right decision. It showcased my skills. Personally, it provided a kind of closure I didn't even realize I needed. Seeing my parents forced to acknowledge my worth, to depend on the daughter they discarded, satisfied something deep inside me. Vanessa called my office yesterday, left a voicemail, asking if we could meet for coffee. I haven't returned the call. Part of me wants to hear what she has to say after all these years. Another part remembers watching her stand silently while our parents blamed me for her mistakes. Uncle Terence says healing takes time, and forgiveness is a personal choice nobody can force. Aunt Lucinda reminds me that holding on to anger only hurts myself. They're probably right, but I'm not ready to let go of the walls I built. Those walls protected me when nobody else would. My career continues thriving, cases keep coming, victories keep accumulating. My reputation grows stronger. Every courtroom appearance reminds me how far I've traveled from that scared, bewildered 11-year-old girl packing those 2 suitcases while her family watched. That girl survived. She studied, and she became someone powerful enough to save the very family that abandoned her. Whether I choose to rebuild relationships with my parents and sister remains uncertain. Right now, focusing on my work, on the life I've meticulously crafted, feels more important than revisiting painful history. Maybe someday circumstances will change, but today, I'm content being the attorney they tried to bury. The irony of their desperation leading them directly to my office still makes me smile sometimes. They sought the best criminal defense lawyer available, and they found the daughter they threw away. Justice truly works in mysterious ways, and sometimes the universe delivers exactly what people deserve. For now, I have cases to prepare, clients to represent, and a future to build. My family knows where to find me if they're ever ready to face the truth about what they did. Until then, I'll continue proving that success doesn't require their approval or their support. The girl they blamed became the woman they needed. And you know what? That, my friends, is revenge enough. If you've ever felt the sting of profound family betrayal or found unexpected strength in the most unlikely places, tell me your story in the comments below. How did you find your own brand of justice?